The most powerful force in the restaurant industry isn't a food critic, a celebrity chef, or a TV show. It's a tire company. And the wild part? That was never an accident. Michelin is currently the world's largest tire manufacturer, pulling in over $28 billion a year in revenue, employing nearly 130,000 people across the globe, and somehow also deciding which restaurants deserve to be called the best on the planet. The connection between tires and fine dining makes absolutely no sense until you understand the brilliance of the two brothers who started it all. Let's go back to 1889. Clermont-Ferrand, a quiet industrial town in central France. Édouard and André Michelin have just taken over their family's failing business. The company, originally called Barbier-Daubrée, had been around since 1832, making unglamorous rubber products. Gaskets, valves, brake pads, rubber balls. It was the kind of business that kept the lights on but never set the world on fire. The brothers were an unlikely duo. André, the older one, born in 1853, was the salesman, the marketer, the man who understood how to tell a story. Édouard, 6 years younger, was the engineer, the tinkerer, the one who lived in the workshop with grease under his fingernails. Together, they were about to build something neither could have built alone. The moment that changed everything wasn't a boardroom decision or a market analysis. It was a cyclist showing up at their factory door with a flat tire. The tire was glued to the rim, and it took over 3 hours just to peel it off, repair it, and reattach it. Then the whole thing had to sit overnight to dry. The next morning, Édouard took the repaired bicycle out into the factory yard to test it. After just a few hundred meters, the tire failed again. Most people would have shrugged and moved on. Édouard Michelin saw an opportunity. He became obsessed with building a pneumatic tire that could be removed and repaired quickly, without the glue, without the overnight wait, without the frustration. By the summer of 1891, he had it. A removable pneumatic tire, patented and ready. Repair time dropped from hours to 15 minutes. That single innovation transformed the brothers' struggling rubber shop into a tire company with a future. But a patent means nothing if nobody uses it. The Michelin brothers needed a stage, and they found one in competitive cycling. That same year, 1891, a rider named Charles Tarrant used Michelin's new removable tires in the Paris-Brest-Paris race, one of the most grueling cycling events of the era. Tarrant won, and suddenly, everyone wanted to know what was on his wheels. 4 years later, the brothers made an even bolder move. They fitted pneumatic tires to an automobile and entered it in the 1895 Paris-Bordeaux-Paris race. This was audacious. Cars were barely a thing. There were fewer than 3,000 automobiles in all of France. Most people still thought the car was a novelty that would never replace the horse. But the Michelins weren't just selling tires, they were selling a vision of the future. A future where people drove cars, drove them far, and drove them often. And the more people drove, the more tires they'd wear out. This insight, this understanding that their product's success was tied to an entire ecosystem of behavior, is what separates Michelin from every other industrial company of its era. They didn't just manufacture, they manufactured demand. In 1898, the company introduced what would become one of the most recognizable mascots in commercial history, Bibendum, the Michelin Man. The origin story is almost too good. While attending an exposition in Lyon in 1894, Édouard noticed a stack of tires that, if you squinted, looked like a figure of a man without arms. He filed the idea away. 4 years later, André met a French cartoonist named Marius Roussillon, who went by the pen name Au Galop. Roussillon showed André a rejected advertisement he'd created for a Munich brewery. It depicted a large, regal figure hoisting a glass of beer with the Latin phrase, Nunc est bibendum, underneath. Now is the time for drinking. André immediately saw it. Replace the beer-drinking man with a figure made of tires, and you've got something unforgettable. Au Galop adapted the image, and Bibendum was born. Today, over 90% of the world's population can recognize him instantly. He's one of the oldest trademarks still in active commercial use, appearing in over 170 countries. Not bad for a mascot inspired by a stack of tires and a rejected beer ad. But the real masterstroke, the move that business schools should study, came in 1900, the year the Michelin Guide was born. Remember, there are fewer than 3,000 cars in France at this point. The road infrastructure is primitive. There are no gas stations on every corner, no GPS, no roadside assistance. Driving long distances is an adventure, and not always a pleasant one. So the Michelin brothers published a guide, a free pocket-sized book containing maps, tire-changing instructions, lists of gas stations, mechanics, and places to eat and sleep along French roads. They printed 35,000 copies for a country with 3,000 cars. Think about that ratio. For every car in France, there were nearly 12 copies of this guide floating around. The brothers weren't targeting current drivers. They were targeting future ones. They were planting the idea that driving was accessible, manageable, even enjoyable if you had the right information, and of course, the right tires. If anything, it was a sneaky publicity campaign, now legendary for its success. The guide made driving seem less intimidating. It encouraged people to explore, to take weekend trips, to visit that restaurant in the next town over. Every kilometer driven was a kilometer of tire wear. Every trip was a step closer to needing new Michelins. The guide wasn't a charity project. It was a demand generation engine disguised as a public service. Today, this concept lives on digitally through Via Michelin, their online mapping service that continues connecting travelers with destinations worldwide. For 20 years, the guide was free. Then André Michelin visited a tire shop one day and saw something that bothered him. A copy of his beloved guide was being used to prop up a workbench. He decided on the spot that the guide would no longer be free, famously declaring that man only truly respects what he pays for. Starting in 1920, the Michelin Guide cost 7 francs, and it kept evolving. In 1926, the guide introduced its star rating system for restaurants. By 1931, it had expanded to the 2- and 3-star system we know today. What had started as a clever marketing tool for a tire company was becoming the most powerful arbiter of culinary excellence on Earth. And this is where the story takes a fascinating turn, because the Michelin Guide didn't just become influential, it became feared. Today, there are only 145 3-star restaurants in the entire world, out of millions of restaurants. The exclusivity is almost absurd. A single Michelin star can transform a struggling restaurant into a destination. A 3rd star can make a chef immortal, and losing a star, that can be devastating. Chef Jean-Michel Laurent, who was downgraded from 3 stars to 2, reported an immediate 20 to 30% drop in business. The financial consequences are real and severe. And then there's the story of Bernard Loiseau, a French chef who achieved the pinnacle, 3 Michelin stars, for his restaurant Le Relais Bernard Loiseau in Saulieu. He was celebrated, revered, at the very top of his profession. But the pressure consumed him. "If I lose a star, I'll kill myself," he once confided to fellow 3-star chef Jacques Lamalloise. By 2003, deeply in debt and suffering from severe clinical depression, Loiseau died by suicide after presiding over the lunch service at his restaurant. He was 52 years old. His story became the primary inspiration for the character of Auguste Gusteau in Pixar's Ratatouille, the celebrated chef whose restaurant faces demotion and who ultimately dies from a broken heart. The Michelin Guide's inspectors operate in almost eerie secrecy. Many of Michelin's own top executives have never met an inspector. The inspectors themselves are advised not to disclose their occupation, even to their own parents, who might be tempted to boast about it. This level of operational security would be impressive for an intelligence agency. For a restaurant guide published by a tire company, it's extraordinary. The guide now covers over 30,000 restaurants across 3 continents. More than 30 million copies have been sold. There are 3,543 Michelin-starred restaurants in 41 countries, with France leading at 639, followed by Japan with 547 and Italy with 395. What started as a tool to get people to drive more has become a global cultural institution. This is a company that has reinvented itself before. They went from rubber gaskets to bicycle tires, from bicycle tires to automobile tires, from automobile tires to road maps, from road maps to the most powerful restaurant rating system ever created, from bias ply to radials, from radials to green tires, from a French provincial factory to a global empire spanning 170 countries. The thread running through all of it is a peculiar kind of vision. The Michelin brothers understood something that most industrialists miss. You don't just sell a product. You sell the conditions that make people need your product. You don't sell tires. You sell the open road, the weekend getaway, the 3-star restaurant 200 kilometers from home. You sell the journey. The tires just happen to be what makes the journey possible. And that's how a rubber factory in Clermont-Ferrand became a $25 billion empire. Not by being the cheapest, not by being the loudest, but by being the smartest. By understanding that the best way to sell tires was to give people a reason to drive. And then, almost by accident, becoming the ultimate authority on where to eat when you got there. And since we're talking tires, next time we're busting one of the biggest myths in the automotive world. You've probably been told that filling your tires with nitrogen is worth the premium. But is it actually? Or is it just an upsell at the tire shop? That's exactly what we're digging into next.